So our gospel reading today kind of picks up off of where we were last week. It's now the evening of that first Easter, right? That first Easter day in the Gospel of John. The disciples are behind locked doors because whatever just happened to Jesus, they're pretty sure is likely going to happen to them as well. So they're a little afraid. And into that fear, Jesus appears and, of course, says, "Peace be with you," which I also think might have been a little disturbing as well. Not going to lie. Because I have any number of things that I imagined when, went through their heads when Jesus just suddenly pops up because, the door is locked and a few things like that. But we'll put that aside for the time being. Jesus proceeds to then show them his wounds, right? And I think that's important. Because I think it's important for us to remember that resurrection does not erase the harm that was done to him. It's not pretending the cross didn't exist. It's not just saying, "Oh, nope, forget all about that." It is a life that still carries the marks of suffering, and yet it is a life that now is no longer defined by that suffering. It is God's refusal to let harm be the end of the story. But it doesn't forget that there was indeed harm. Which means the Christian claim is not that suffering is just erased. It's that suffering is transformed. Fear gives way to joy. Confusion gives way to certainty and clarity. Just like Mary earlier, they have now seen the Lord. They have seen it for themselves. But one of them was missing. One of them was not there. Thomas. And when the others tell him, "We have seen the Lord," Thomas responds, "Well, unless I touch, unless I see, I will not believe. I need to see this." And over time, that's earned him a nickname, Doubting Thomas, right? Which I don't think is fair. I really don't. I don't think it's a fair name because Mary came and told the disciples the exact same thing, and they didn't believe. Right? They were still holed up. They didn't believe until they saw. So it's the doubting disciples in general, right? Mary's witness was not enough for them. Just like the disciples' witness was not enough for Thomas. He needed to experience it. Thomas isn't demanding anything the rest of them have not already had. He's like, "I want what you got. I want that. I want the same encounter." Which means this is not primarily a story about doubt. It's a story about what it feels like to be the person who wasn't in the room, right? The person who didn't have that experience. The one who missed it. The one who hears everyone else speak with such certainty and such clarity and quietly realizes, "I don't have what they have." And that kind of distance is actually very common, right? Because faith for many people is not just a straight line. It's uneven. There are moments when things feel very, very clear. And then there are moments when they don't. There are people who can point to experiences that have shaped their belief. And there are others who hear those stories and go, "Well, I never had that. Why not?" And when a community starts talking about faith as if everyone's experience is exactly the same, the people who weren't in the room, so to speak, start to feel it. A week later, as these disciples are gathered again, this time Thomas is there, right? The doors are still locked. The fear hasn't completely disappeared. And Jesus shows up again. And this time, he shows up for Thomas, right? And it's not with frustration. It's not with correction. but with invitation. Put your fingers right here. See, I am real. See my hands. Reach out your hand. Put it in my side. In other words, come closer. Come closer. And notice what Jesus does not say, right? He does not say, you should have believed them. What the heck? Right? He doesn't say, why did you not trust their testimony? He doesn't shame Thomas for needing more. Instead, he gives him exactly what the others have already received. He gives Thomas what Thomas needs to believe. He steps into the gap. And that tells us Thomas is not really the problem, right? It's that gap. The gap between those who have experienced something and those who have not. The gap between certainty and uncertainty. Between presence and absence. And Jesus doesn't ignore that gap. He likes to step into it. So if we go back to last week's text, we had another gap, right? We had, at the end of that story, Jesus appears to Mary Magdalene in the garden, and when she recognizes him, she reaches for him. She reaches for him, and his response is very different there. With Thomas, it was, come closer, touch me. With Mary, he says, do not hold on to me. He says, do not hold on to me, which sounds strange, right? Until we kind of start putting these whole story together and we start to see maybe what's happening. Mary is trying to hold on to Jesus as she knew him before. She's trying to keep the moment. Trying to make sure that she doesn't lose him again, right? And Jesus gently redirects her, not because her love is wrong, but because resurrection is not a return to what was. Right? Those scars tell us you don't go back to what was before the scars, before the crucifixion. She can't cling to the old form because something new is happening. Something new is now emerging and going forth. Mary reaches for Jesus and is told, do not cling. Thomas hesitates to believe and is told, come closer. Now, it seems to be a contradiction, right? A little bit. But we need to realize Jesus is not responding to the same need. Mary needs something different than Thomas needs. Mary has experienced Jesus. She has experienced him and she is trying to hold on to him. Thomas has not experienced Jesus and is struggling with his belief. So Jesus meets them both. But he does not leave either one where they are, right? Both of these people exist in every church. There are people who have known Jesus for a long time. They've experienced Jesus. People have had real, meaningful experiences of faith, moments that were clear, moments that were powerful, moments that were certain. And without realizing it, they begin to hold on to those moments. Hold on to the way faith used to feel, the way it used to make sense, trying to preserve something that once was, but maybe it has now changed and altered. And the challenge for them is not disbelief. Maybe it's letting go. It's the letting go and trusting that Jesus is still present even if the experience is a little different now. Jesus is present even when he doesn't look the same as he did before. Because remember, she didn't even recognize him, right? Then there are the people who feel like they missed something, the Thomases. People who hear others talk about faith with confidence and wonder, where did that come from? Right? These people aren't rejecting faith. They just don't have the same experience to stand on, and it's a struggle. And their struggle is not rebellion. It's simply distance from the experience, just that desire to have that experience. And at the end of the passage, Jesus says, "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have come to believe." That sounds a little bit like a correction, right? It's like, well, you guys had to see to believe, but other people, they don't need to. But I don't think that's quite what the point is. I think it's a recognition that most people who are going to come after this moment will not have what the disciples had. They are not going to have that same exact experience, even though we're like Thomas and we want it, right? We want that certainty. We want that. They will not see with their eyes. They will not touch with their hands, and yet they will still be invited into faith. Not through shame, not through pressure, but through a community where Christ continues to be made known and where Christ continues to be felt and experienced. Which means the challenge lies with the Christian community. How are we making Christ known? How are people seeing Christ and experiencing Christ when they encounter us? Because Jesus breathed that Holy Spirit, right? And we're told that we have that same Holy Spirit within us. And how are people experiencing Christ through us in their lives? So maybe the question this morning isn't simply, do you believe? Maybe it's, where are you in this story? Where are you? Are you Mary holding on to something that needs to be released? Are you standing at a distance, wondering if there's a place for you here? Or are you somewhere in the middle? Because the good news is, in both cases, that good news is the same. Christ is still moving towards people wherever you are at. Sometimes to say, don't cling, I'm doing something new. Let it go. And let's move forward. And sometimes to say, come closer. Come closer and experience my peace and my love. And always to make sure no one is left outside the room long enough to believe they were never part of the story.